another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors on a 2014 Mini Cooper. Now this is the 5-lug model here, and this is just a Mini Cooper base. It does have the 1.5 liter twin turbo motor. There's a lot of different models of Mini Cooper, so just make sure you've got the right parts when you order things up. There's different thicknesses of rotor. The Cooper S has a thicker rotor than this one, and then there's also lots of 4-lug models out there too. So just make sure you're getting the right parts when you do this. First thing I'm going to do is loosen and remove these caliper slide pin bolts, and those are a 13 millimeter. You can also grab a 17 millimeter wrench and fit it in here. It does need to be a thinner profile wrench. A lot of wrenches won't fit in there, but you can hold that slide pin steady while we loosen and remove these slide pin bolts. Just get those loosened up here first. And we'll set those aside. You can see that there's still some thread lock on that bolt. And this one, because of the brake line in the way, that's why I've got this universal on here. This wobble extension makes it a little bit easier to get in there with a socket. But a wrench works just fine too. Now these pads on the driver's side, the passenger side does not have this, but on the driver's side you've got this wear sensor. And this has got a wire, and it just it's clipped into this right here by your ABS sensor. You can just use a screwdriver to wedge that out. It's just rubber, just kind of pressed in there, like so. And then it's got another little hanger back here. I'm just going to use a screwdriver and just kind of pry that out of its little hanger right here. Now to get to our connector on our wear sensor, just to disconnect this, we're just going to remove this as an 8 millimeter. Just a little screw that holds that in, a little 8 millimeter. We'll take that right off. And then a pair of diagonals will help you maybe pull this over here. This is just one of those little plunger type of snaps. Just pull out the upper part, and then that comes out like so. If you're careful, you can do that without breaking it. And then really we can just fold this back. And it's this one right here. This is your brake pad wear sensor. And this will just kind of snap out of here so that we can disconnect it like so. And just press that in with your thumb and pop it out. There we go. Okay, so now we can pull off the caliper and just kind of feed that sensor wire through the opening there. I'm just going to use this little hook. It's like a little old bungee cord with a piece of rope. So we can just hook that up on the coil out of the way. Just, you don't really want to let that caliper dangle down like that. And then we can pull out the old brake pads. And you can see right here on this inner pad right there where it's just starting to oh, there goes the sidewalls on my wife's car. Oh well. But right there you can see where it's just starting to make contact with that sensor, and that's why it's triggering that light to come on. Now if it hasn't made contact there, you can pull this out, and you can reuse these if you need to. Just like so, it just kind of pops out. Just like that. See, it's got this little metal spring on there that kind of clips it in place. And then we can pull out the outside pad. Just something to point out, the outside and inside pad are different. The inside pad has got this little ridge here, but you can tell it's got the circle here where the caliper has been pressing on that, or the piston's been pressing on that, and then this is your outside pad. Slightly different design. Just make sure you get those correct when you're putting it back. Okay, now we can also loosen and remove these caliper support bracket bolts, and these are 18 millimeter. These have got a washer on there, so just keep that in mind. We'll set those aside. And it's a good idea to have one hand on this bracket while you take out that other bolt, otherwise this will drop on the ground. Now you can see the rotor is held on by this Allen head or hex head bolt. This is a 6mm that fits in there. Looks like that. And then we can just grab a little sledgehammer or rotor remover and give it a little tap or two. Well, that came off easy. Pull off the old rotor. And before you put the new rotor on, it's a good idea to clean this hub off with a wire brush. This one's really not too bad. That just prevents the new rotor from sticking. You can also just use like a little wire wheel like this on a drill. Just make sure that you wear some eye protection. Now a lot of times the new rotors are packed in some sort of a grease, this shiny stuff on here, so it's a good idea to wipe that off. So I've just got some brake clean sprayed on this little paper towel and just kind of wipe that down. Alright, and then we can put the new rotor on and just line it up. And I did find a torque spec online for this. They said 19 foot-pounds. Now before we can put this caliper bracket back on, we're going to pull out each of these slide pins here, like so, and just wipe off the old grease that's on there. It's pretty dirty. Just get them all cleaned up. And then I'm just going to grab some of this Sil-Glide. It's a silicone-based grease. Don't use regular car grease. It doesn't work. It'll get stuck in there and it doesn't work well with the high temp. This stuff's really good for brakes, and then just put that in there. Make sure that spins freely. Same with this other one. Now you'll notice these are different. This one here has this little black rubber ring around the end of this slide pin. That's the other thing, is if you use regular grease, it will cause that to swell and then the slide pin will get stuck. So just make sure you use something like this. I mean, you could use, there's lots of other greases that will work that are approved for brakes. But Sil-Glide says that it won't harm rubber or anything like that. So we'll put that in there. Sometimes I'll even clean these out a little bit more, but that looks pretty good, and just make sure that it spins freely. Now on these pad retainer clips or these abutment clips, a lot of times new brake pads will come with replacement clips. These did not, so I'm just going to pull these off and get everything nice and clean on this caliper support bracket before we'll have to clean these off too before we put them back on. And again, you can just hit that really well with a wire brush. Sometimes I'll just set it right there, support it right there while I do that. If you live in a really rusty area, rust will build up underneath those clips, and then it'll cause the brakes to bind or they'll get hung up there. I'll put these clips back on. I don't live in a very rusty area, so I don't really deal with a lot of rust or any issues with these clips, but I don't think it's a bad idea to put some grease underneath there too. But here I'm just going to brush these mostly inside these little channels where the brake pad rides. Alright, once you got those clips back on and all cleaned up, it's a little bit easier to put some grease on there before you put it on the car, because you don't want to get any of this Sil-Glide or any of this grease on the surface of the rotor or of the pad material. But it really helps to put a little bit in these little channels here. That will prevent the brakes from getting hung up in there. Okay, then we can put our caliper bracket back in place and get these bolts started. Now the torque spec I found online for this was 81 foot-pounds. This is the torque wrench I'm using, the gear wrench 85062, and it's got this little collar that you can pull back and just change it one at a time, and it's kind of nice. It holds it in place. Now this of course has got Newton meters on the back, but I'm just used to foot-pounds, so what I looked up was the foot-pounds, and it looks like 81 was correct. Really, you should just double check your manual and see what you can find, but I found 81 foot-pounds for these caliper bracket bolts. Okay, now we can put the new brake pads in, but before I do that, I am also going to put a little bit of this Sil Glide on the shim, or the back of the shim here, on each pad, and then a little bit at each of the ends here, which will help it slide inside this little channel. And we're just going to get that lined up, press it in place, do the same thing with the inside pad. This grease just seems to cut down on a little bit of the vibration or the noise. Now remember, on the inside pad, this is the one with this taller little part that sticks off of the backing plate. That looks good. Now before I can put the caliper back on, we need to press this caliper piston back inside the caliper body so that we'll be able to fit over the pads. But before we do that, we need to take a look up top underneath the hood and make sure that there's enough room in that master cylinder so that when we push the fluid backwards through the brake line here and it goes up into that brake fluid reservoir, we just need to make sure that it's not going to overflow and make a big mess. Now the master cylinder is underneath this plastic cover right here, and we just need to pull this off to get to that. And it's fairly simple to do. Just grab a 10mm socket here, pull off this little plastic nut. It just goes over this little stud. We'll set that aside. And then the rest is with a flathead screwdriver. Just turn all of these to the left. 1, 2, 3, and then this one here in front, 4. And then this should just lift out of here. It's got this little vent that's connected down below, and it looks like we've got a metal clip on here too that just holds this together. Just pull that off. Set it over there, and that's it. Okay, so now you can see here's our master cylinder, and if you get a powerful enough light and you just shine it here on the reservoir, I don't know how well this is showing up on camera, but it allows me to see the level, which we're actually right below this seam. So there's enough room in here for me to push the caliper piston back in without overflowing this or creating a mess. If someone had been filling the brake fluid or topping this off as the pads wear down, then the likelihood of this spilling and overflowing would be much greater. So there's really no need for us to open this and take out any fluid, and really a lot of people ask me why I don't open that before pushing the caliper piston back in. And the truth is, this is not a pressurized system. It's sealed to prevent air or water from getting in. But when you push the caliper piston back and the air that's in here that compresses, it is still allowed to escape out the lid here. It is somewhat vented, and so air can get out. That's why if I've experimented with that. I push the caliper piston back in and then come up here and open this, and you don't even feel any pressure at all. It doesn't whoosh like a gas tank would. So we can just grab an old brake pad and this tool, and then we'll just turn that in slowly, pushing that caliper piston back in. Now you could use a C-clamp on this, on the outside, or channel locks, or even some large vice grips will work. But this is pushing our brake fluid backwards through the system and into that master cylinder reservoir. Now you'll see over here on this side, this is our brake bleeder screw, and you can just pull the cap off of that and open that and push the old fluid out that direction, or cycle the old fluid out of the caliper that way rather than pushing it backwards through the system, and that's fine too. It's not a bad idea to cycle the old fluid out of here every once in a while. We'll just get that all bottomed out and take this tool off. Of course, it's not a bad idea to change your brake fluid every so often. This fluid looks pretty clean, but you can double check your manufacturer's recommendations on that. We'll pull this little caliper hanger off. Then we can put the caliper just carefully lined up over here over the pads. You may have to pull back on the slide pins just a little bit to line up these holes. We'll get these slide pin bolts started. And remember, we need to grab a thin profile 17 millimeter wrench to hold that in place. And we'll just get these snug down. Now the torque spec I found online for these caliper slide pin bolts is 23 foot-pounds. Again, you can double check your manual on that, but a lot of the listings are in Newton meters. I just kind of converted that, came up with 23. And remember, for this top one, I'm just using this little universal in order to get past this brake line here. We'll just do the same thing, 23 foot-pounds. Okay, and now here's where you would normally grab your new sensor, but the replacement part that we picked up from our local store is a different connector. So I'm not going to be able to change that. So I'm just going to have to put this old one back on. Unfortunately, we'll see if we can't order up the correct one, maybe from the dealer. Might be a dealer-only part, but the light may turn off anyways, but I feel like we should just replace this. So I'm going to go ahead and order one from the dealer, and then when that comes in, we'll just take this back off. Take this apart again and swap this out. Just press it all the way down. So it's got that little metal clip in there, so it really just snaps into place, and it fits right into this groove and then just holds in place down there. And then this part just slides into that hanger right there, like that. And then this part also just clips into this little metal groove. It's kind of got a little slot there, so it just lines up like so. And then we got to pull this back. And then here's our connector right here. You just snap those together till they click, and just press this right back in. Same thing, it's got a little groove down here at the bottom, and that just kind of holds it out of the way. And one more little clip right here at the bottom. And then we've got this little clip to put back, which goes in this hole here. Kind of come around the back. You want to push it in until it's fully seated, and then press the outside cap through. That snaps in place. And then this little 8 millimeter head screw just kind of goes right there. And that's pretty much everything. Go ahead and step on your brake pedal a few times until it feels firm. Now don't press all the way down to the floor, that can damage the seals in the master cylinder, but just press it halfway down several times until it feels firm. And what that does is it presses the caliper piston back out, pushing these pads up against the rotor in place where they need to be. And then go ahead and double check the fluid level in your master cylinder if that needs to be topped off at all. Double check all the torque specs in your manual. What I found online, like I said, was 19 for the brake rotor here, this hub bolt, 81 for the larger caliper bolts that hold the caliper bracket on, and then 23 for these caliper slide pin bolts that hold the caliper onto that bracket. And also that may be different depending on the type of model that you have, or whether it's a 5-lug or a 4-lug. Like I said, I don't know if those are correct. That's just what I used and what I found. If anyone has any info on that, they can please put that down in the comments. And remember, I'm going to get this sensor changed out once I get a new one ordered up. It is probably a good idea to go ahead and order those and change those when you do a brake job. I'm going to do the back brakes on this same vehicle as well, so if you need a video for that, I'll go ahead and get a link to that in the description for you too. Alright, so we're back together and everything's working great, but just a quick note on this. You know, like I mentioned, I was having a hard time getting the right parts for those wear sensors, and we ended up needing to order them. We went back to a few local parts stores, and we could never find this one here, this oval one, until we switched the year to 2015. Now, that would seem like a pretty stupid, obvious mistake. You know, just maybe I had the wrong year. But I'll tell you, this thing is manufactured in March of 2014. The title says 2014. We did a VIN lookup, and the VIN decoder online says that it's a 2014 model. So, just wanted to point that out. If you run into something similar, if you've got a 2014 or think you have a 2014, you may need to get some 2015 parts, at least on the sensors. I didn't get a chance to cross-reference the brake pads and the rotors, but what they gave us did work on the front. However, the back, They had originally given us a different pad and we needed to swap that out. So it might be for that same reason. So the sensors we ended up using, we couldn't find one local for the front. So this is what we ordered online. This BAPMIC or BAPMIC. That's the, it says it fits Mini 14 to 16, 2014 to 2016 for the front sensor. And of course it worked great. It was exactly like the one we took off, had this little bend in it. That's how we could kind of tell the difference in the pictures online. And we were able to find the rear here locally by Beck Arnley, and it worked great as well. So I don't know really exactly what was going on here. Like I said, look for these, and you may need to get in there. If you've got a 2014 or think you do, you might need to order some of those parts that are listed as 2015. We got it done. Everything's working great. The lights are all off on the dash, and it's good to go. So just wanted to say thanks again for watching. I appreciate you watching the video. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If so, give it a thumbs up if you don't mind. That does help me out. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.